Well, welcome. My name is Wendy Roller-Sook, and I'm the chair of the Department of Communication Studies, Law, and Political Science. And I am most pleased to be able to welcome you to the kickoff for the American Democracy Project this year. So we're very excited to share with you our plans about what the year will look like. And we really thank you for being here and being interested and hopefully participating with us throughout the year in these many exciting activities and events that we have planned. For those of you who may not be aware, the American Democracy Project is a campus-wide initiative that works to prepare students and the campus community to be engaged citizens. And while the project is officially housed in our department, it is truly a collaborative effort. So we have invited some of our collaborators to help us kick off the year and share a little bit about their role with the American Democracy Project. So we're going to get right to that. The first person that I'd like to introduce is Provost Jill Arensdorf. Provost Arensdorf is also the Vice President for Academic Affairs at Fort Hays State University and Professor of Leadership Programs. So if you wouldn't mind coming up.
Thank you, Dr. Roller-Sook, and welcome to the first American Democracy Project event of the fall semester. It's great to have the room full and the sign-in sheet having to have been turned over to the back sheet for names. So again, welcome. My name is Jill Arensdorf, and as Dr. Roller-Sook indicated, I currently have the honor and pleasure of serving as the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs here at Fort Hays State University. I want to share just a quick background about how I started engaging in this work at Fort Hays State University and share a few brief comments and then move on to our next colleagues who have things to share as well. So I started at Fort Hays State University as a faculty member in 2002. I started in the fall as a part-time faculty member in leadership studies. We were growing as a program at that time, and there was a half position that was created, and I applied for and was hired. The half position was teaching a couple of courses throughout the academic year and serving as the assistant director of the newly formed at that time Center for Civic Leadership. The Center for Civic Leadership has evolved and is something a little different, and I think you'll hear a little bit more about that from Dr. Niffen today. But that was my first role at Fort Hays State University. So I said yes to that position of teaching and working as an assistant director of a center that I didn't really know much about. And my world became bigger on that day. Bigger than I ever thought it would, in a good way. That year, that half position, due to some other circumstances, turned into a full-time position. And so by spring semester, I was a full-time faculty teaching in leadership studies and still working as an assistant director in the Center for Civic Leadership. That year or the year after, Fort Hays State University, I believe it was the year after, 2003, Fort Hays State University started engaging with the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, ASCU, as part of an early adopter group for the American Democracy Project. And one of my colleagues in leadership studies, her name is Christy Brungart. She's retired from the university, but many of our faculty and staff colleagues in here, maybe some of you students, are familiar with Christy. She led a book study. She was the first lead at Fort Hays State University to get ADP started. And she led a book study on this book, Educating Citizens, Preparing America's Undergraduates for Lives of Moral and Civic Responsibility. It's a great book. It's copyright 2003, so it's a little bit dated. And this was my first opportunity to connect with colleagues at this institution to better understand the mission of a regional comprehensive university and the mission of Fort Hays State University, which is all about creating citizen leaders. That was in 2002 and 2003. And so it's pretty cool to stand before you today in 2025 and still be talking about this work and having watched the university for now over 20 years engage in this work. I am so proud of the work that Fort Hays students faculty, and staff have been a part of connected to civic engagement over the last over 20 years. I've got some goosebumps right now because I'm just so proud of the work that has been done and will continue to be done by many faculty, staff, and students at Fort Hays State University. So our mission at Fort Hays State University is to provide, I do have to use my paper for this so I don't mess up the words, to provide accessible, quality education to Kansas, the nation, and the world through an innovative community of teachers, scholars, and professionals, and my favorite part, to develop engaged global citizen leaders. That has been the fabric of our institution since its very beginning. It wasn't stated in the mission until a more recent iteration of the mission statement, but we've always been about creating human beings, helping develop human beings that can be engaged in communities and beyond. And that's a really important thing to understand as a student, faculty, and or staff at Fort Hays State University. As a regional comprehensive university, our heart is to serve our region. And our region is not only Northwest Kansas, but expands across the globe. And I had the opportunity this year at Convocation to talk a little bit more about that through 4 priorities that I've outlined for academic affairs over the next year. So I'm going to just take a few minutes to talk about those priorities and then share a few thoughts about how I see the American Democracy Project engaging in those priorities. So these priorities are not uniquely specific to Fort Hays State. They're not uniquely probably specific to colleges and universities across the institution. And the way that we deploy our work is. So the 4 academic priorities for this year and beyond, they're multi-year priorities, I see ADP work in all of them. The first is embodying our regional purpose through engagement and dialogue. We're doing that today. We're coming together to engage with one another and hopefully dialogue a bit about not only the American Democracy Project, but how you fit into that project. And so that's an easy connection to that priority. The second priority outlined was student success as a shared responsibility. Over the last year, the Student Affairs Vice President, Dr. Joey Lynn, and I have been engaged in a reorganization of student success at Fort Hays State University, and many of you had input into that process. And the outcome of that process is now much of the student success work has been redefined and is currently being implemented differently than it has been at Fort Hays since I've been here, and I think probably ever. So our definition of student success at Fort Hays talks not only about retaining students and graduating them, but also it talks about social responsibility as engaged global citizens. We want our students to get good jobs when they finish their college degree. We want that. We want that for you students. And while you're here and beyond, we want to help you develop the skill set and the knowledge to be able to go out and be community members and citizens in whatever communities you find yourself in, whether that be Hays, Kansas, Hill City, Kansas, my hometown, Garden City, Kansas, Denver, Colorado, or perhaps Beijing, China. We want you to be citizens in those communities and be engaged in that way. And so student success is a shared responsibility. Our definition of student success does include that global engaged citizen leader component. Thirdly, we want academic program. I want academic program and innovation and digital transformation. You'll learn a little bit more today. One of the projects that ADP is deploying this year is the Civic Passport. And I believe, as do the coordinators believe that, and advisors believe that that's an example of a program innovation that connects to many academic programs and will help students, faculty, and staff develop the skills to be an engaged citizen, not only at our university, but in our community, wherever our community is for us. And then fourthly, leveraging existing data resources to drive academic affairs, strategic decisions. This one we have some work to do. I don't see as much of a direct connection. However, assessment of programs and ADP specifically for this example, and this luncheon is going to be really important. So we know what's working and what's not working. And so we'll leverage that data along with our peers to figure out what's working and not working to help deploy our mission at Fort Hays State University. So thank you for engaging today. Thank you for engaging for the past over 20 years in the American Democracy Project. And thank you for continuing to embody our mission to develop globally engaged citizen leaders. At this point, I will turn it back over to Dr. Rohleder-Suk, and then I believe we'll have opportunity for Q&A at the end of the day, right? Or at the end of our time together. Thank you, guys.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that, Provost Arensdorf. Yes, we will do Q&A after we have a chance to introduce all of our collaborators. So our next speaker is Dean David Macy. He is the Dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences and Professor of English. Dean Macy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rohleder-Suk. It's good to see you all here today. Hope you're enjoying lunch. This is a very important, it's a very exciting, it's a very challenging time. I think we all realize that on multiple levels. The work of the American Democracy Project, both nationally and on our campus, has perhaps never been more important, nor perhaps more challenging. The polarization of public discourse, the fracturing of shared civic space into increasingly partisan and self-enclosed echo chambers, and the challenging social, economic, and geopolitical environment in which we find ourselves demand careful reflection, thoughtful discussion, and informed action. The American Democracy Project creates the condition of possibility for addressing these challenges and for transforming our world on the local, national, and global levels. And in that way, it directly supports and advances the mission of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, which is to prepare students for successful professional lives, lifelong learning, and meaningful and informed civic engagement in a rapidly changing and in an increasingly unpredictable and unstable world. The French diplomat, political theorist, and sociologist Alexis Count de Tocqueville visited the United States in 1831 and 1832. A keen observer and commentator, de Tocqueville wrote in his seminal work, Democracy in America, that, and I quote, "It is above all in the present, his present and our present, democratic age, that the true friends of liberty and human grandeur must remain constantly vigilant and ready to prevent the social power from lightly sacrificing the particular rights of a few individuals to the general execution of its designs. In such time, there is no citizen so obscure that it is not very dangerous to allow him to be oppressed, and there are no individual rights so unimportant that they can be sacrificed to arbitrariness with impunity." Words for our moment. This too is our work, and it is the work of the American Democracy Project, which will be undertaken through this year's rich and wide-ranging series of presentations, discussions, and civic engagement activities which teach us and show us and model for us the ways in which we can exist in a democratic and equitable and inclusive and participatory community. William Ellery Channing, famous preacher of the early 19th century, in a sermon delivered during the War of 1812, wrote, "It is our duty to hold fast and to assert, with firmness, those truths and principles on which the welfare of our country seems to depend, but to do this with calmness, with the love of peace, without ill will and revenge. We must use every opportunity of allaying animosities, and we must discourage in decided and open language that rancor, malignity, and unfeeling abuse which too often find their way into our public discourse." I look forward to supporting and to collaborating with the American Democracy Project in this important work of creating, of sustaining, of nourishing civic, thoughtful, reflective, and inclusive dialogue. So thanks to all of the students, the faculty, the staff who are part of this crucial initiative.
Thank you, Dean Macy. Our next collaborator is Dr. Lori Niffen. She is the Omer G. Voss Distinguished Professor of Leadership and Director of Civic Learning and Engagement.
Thank you. I thought I'd start today by telling you about an experience that I had that really drew me into the work of civic learning and engagement. So in 2010, I got to participate in an alternative spring break program to Fort Worth, Texas, where I got to volunteer at the Day Resource Center. I think they're now branded the DRC because I'm still friends with them on Facebook and follow what they do. But I got to travel down there with a group of students and spend a week learning about the issue of homelessness in a different area. And there were academic goals associated with, although it was a co-curricular program, there were some goals around leadership learning since it was driven out of a leadership program. And there were also civic learning goals around issues like homelessness and also the kind of the nonprofit sector and how everyone collaborated together. There was also really intentional critical reflection involved in the program. So we didn't just go do service, we also reflected. We reflected before our trip even started about what we thought about homelessness, about kind of our leadership skills, what we thought we might encounter. And then we also reflected nightly as a group through an oral reflection led by one of the students. And then we also reflected again in a written form individually after our return to talk about what this experience meant as we moved into the world. This single learning experience has transformed me in many ways, and I really think changed the trajectory of my kind of career and my involvement in civic life. Part of that was because the community partner, the Day Resource Center, was so invested in our learning as a co-educator. They weren't there just thinking, okay, I'm going to get some free, student service hours. I think they really took on the role as a co-educator to help develop our civic knowledge, skills, and to provide us a space to practice some of that civic action as well. I don't know about you, but before that trip, I never really thought about what a daytime shelter would offer. I was aware of nighttime shelters, but we got to volunteer at the daytime shelter where we got to learn about things that help to make the lives easier for those who are experiencing homelessness and kind of a route out of that. So something like just having a mailing address. If you've ever applied to a job, the top of that you have a mailing address, right? How do you get correspondence if you don't have a permanent address? There were shower facilities that also had a locker so they could have their items safe in a safe place while they showered. There were social workers assigned to each individual to kind of think about how they might get connected to other resources. So through our volunteering there, we got to interact with the guests and to learn about kind of this system. But also the DRC, as a co-educator, took us to several other nonprofits and faith-based organizations in the area. We got to tour a nighttime shelter to understand their role. We got to go to the Salvation Army to learn about kind of food distribution and clothing distribution. We also got to go to a basement of a church that was hosting an event where individuals could come and spend the night but also get a warm meal and dialogue. So I sat across the table with people who were experiencing homelessness and trying to navigate that system and got to see them face to face, talk to them, and understand kind of what led them to that moment. So there was such deep learning for me in that experience about this system. I think there were a few things that I really walked away with. One, I was incredibly perplexed about complex social issues like homelessness, poverty, food insecurity. I still think about those in different ways after that trip. I was drawn to more forms of leadership that were collective, collaborative, and systemic in nature, and you can see that through my trajectory in the leadership world, which is my home discipline. I became a committed civic actor in many different ways that kind of opened up that door and helped me to see the possibilities of my participation in that process. And I also became in awe of educational experiences and how they can produce commitment to civic life and all different types of learning. And so I changed from being a biology major. Well, I graduated as a biology major. I really wanted to work on the ocean, but no one would hire me. I knew nothing about the ocean. But I decided to go into this pathway of student development, education, civic engagement, and leadership studies. And now it's all coming together in this role. This title you see here, I've just started this semester. And so having opportunities like this to visit with you all and other collaborators is so great, because this work doesn't happen in a silo. Just like I learned on that trip, right? It's systems of people working together, individuals, organizations, all these different people who want to contribute and collaborate. I think the great thing about my job in this system is that I get to wake up every day thinking about this. And so although this work is going to happen all over the university, and in classrooms, in co-curricular programs, and service opportunities, and in various communities, it also somewhat needs to be kind of coordinated and supported and assessed and all these different things. So I get to wake up every day thinking about that and kind of helping to collaborate and be someone who also convenes people as well. So that's what I have to say about civic learning and engagement. I look forward to Q&A as well.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Dr. Amber Nickel. She is an assistant professor. I just said speaker and I scared you a little bit.
Yeah.
Collaborator.
Well, I was like, whoa, I didn't hear
Is an assistant professor of history and the internationalization coordinator for the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. Dr. Nickel.
I was told this would be casual and nobody would prepare anything. That being said, I feel like I should start with a story because everyone else did. So one of the things about me is I started out in rural Colorado in what I considered a small community. I now know better. And I grew up relatively poor with little access to education and definitely not to international travel. And like a lot of folks from where I was from, I was scared of people unlike me. I didn't know much about them. But when I decided to go back to school, my world slowly started to open up a little bit at a time. And the thing that really cracked it open was when I decided to travel abroad for the first time, to begin learning languages, to spend years abroad living in a place completely unlike the one where I was. And it's here that I really developed the empathy that was necessary to be a good citizen no matter where I was. And so this is where I see our projects as really truly aligning, because we're all citizens, not only of Hays, Kansas, of the United States, but also of this world. And collectively, we are facing some of the worst challenges that we have faced in our lifetimes, and we need to prepare ourselves and our students for this. So I'm going to hand it over because I don't have a lot prepared, but happy for questions, answers, to chat with anyone.
Thank you. So now I would like to introduce the ADP executive team. So as you might imagine, there's a lot of work that's done by ADP, and it takes a lot of people, a lot of energy and resources to do that. So first I want to introduce our new student coordinators, Isaac Hargett, and Jordan Myers. You saw, I think, probably both of them when you checked in today. Brittany Reed is with us. She serves as our creative advisor. Brittany is an instructor of communication studies. And then we have two faculty directors. One of our faculty directors, Dr. Sinyan Young, is a professor of communication studies and unfortunately not able to be with us today. Our other faculty director is Dr. Daryl Hamlin, who's going to share with you a few words. Dr. Hamlin is an associate professor of political science. So I'll turn things over to him for a few remarks about ADP's theme this year.
Thank you, all of you, for coming. I see a lot of faces out here that I've worked with over the years. I've been at Fort Hays off and on in various roles since 2007. And for those of you who haven't worked with me, come find me. If you have an idea, I'm very happy to help you make it work. Last year, the theme in ADP was civic listening. The creative citizen is our theme this year. And like last year's theme of civic listening, this theme explores the idea that productive and successful civic engagement necessitates the development of a skill we might not ordinarily associate with active engagement in public life. We don't think about listening as a democratic skill the way we think about, maybe organizing or talking is, but listening is critical. That's what we did last year. Creativity, we believe, is a deeply undervalued part of the responsibility of citizens to approach the daunting public challenges with the skills, with the enterprising energy, and with the empathy that embody the arts, sciences, and humanities in a collaborative, purposeful effort. Democracy is skill-based, yes, but it is also importantly practiced as an art. It's kind of like marriage or parenthood. There are some rules, but the most important parts of it are done from the heart. They're promises. They're things that we do for each other out of a kind of love. And who knows, civic love may be a theme one of these days. The way I understand democracy and democratic life, there's a metaphor for it, and it's jazz. My understanding of jazz is that it is sort of began as a kind of peculiarly American art form, but my friends who are historians or artists may correct me on the actual beginning of that. But I don't know how many of you have ever been to like a jazz bar or seen a quintessential jazz performance. But it's usually 4 or 5, maybe a few more people playing instruments. And each of these people playing instruments is very accomplished as a soloist with the practice of their instruments. There's someone who's usually playing the keyboards, maybe someone playing a guitar, someone with a saxophone, drums, a bass guitar. But at some point, those people who are all playing together, one of them will sort of step out front and begin to play a little solo. That's an improvisational riff off of the underlying melody that everybody else is playing. And then the rest of them sort of stay in the back and kind of keep playing along with that person. And then when that solo is done, somebody else comes in. And they go all the way through the band. The song might last 15, 20 minutes, but they go all the way through the band. Maybe the guitarist steps forward, even the drummer at the end will get to sort of bang it out a little bit with everybody else sort of stepping back. That's what I think democracy is. Like jazz, the skills of democratic life, whether they're technical or whether they're artistic, they are necessary to advance and sustain human survival in the context of, I think we can say it, existential threat. Individual expertise within team purpose, that's jazz, but it's also democracy. It's planning for success with technical and adaptive skills, both for innovation and response, but also for improvisation during inevitable moments of stress and breakdown. It's the ability and the willingness to play in support as well as solo. Citizens must develop and deploy these skills to address the wicked social problems that threaten the very survival of life on this planet. I think this is a way of understanding the current crisis facing humanity and the global need for citizens to use fundamentally democratic skill sets artistically. These skills will need to be used to, if nothing else, thwart any kind of corruptive power structures that undermine the foundational democratic values of our world toward the greater good of survival. So this year with ADP, we're going to do the same things we've always done. You'll see the Times talks, you'll see the voter registration and information efforts. But what we're here to tell you today is we don't always have to play solo. We are here to commit also that we will support the work of others in the community and the global mission of FHSU. We can play in the background too. So just come to us, tell us what kind of song you want to play, and we'll see what we can do to help you do it. Because we want to be part of all the work that is done here that prepares students for a world with wicked problems. We want students to understand that whatever instrument they play as individuals, they will also have to collaborate with and support others creatively to approach the problems of this moment in a way that gets us all through it, with all of our contributions heard and celebrated in the performance. So I think with that, we would love to open this up for some question and answers, because some of you may want to ask more directly of the people who've been here today. But I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank all of the people who introduced themselves and let us know what the work is that they're doing on this campus. Thank you.
So while you're thinking of your questions that you have for all this, I do want to recognize we have a couple of our former student coordinators with us today, Madison Albers and Grace McCord. All can wave. So thank you for being here and for all the work that you have contributed to ADP to get us to where we are today. All right, so who wants to ask the first question?
I'll ask the question. I don't need the mic.
You don't need the mic? Okay.
So maybe you haven't decided any events yet, but if you have, do you have any that you're really excited about for this year?
Well, as I said, we have, the Times Talks, but even those events, I think we want to give a little bit different spin. So one of the things that we're going to be doing in November is there will be a sort of interview conversation with a gentleman named I.B. Dent. Many of you know I.B. He goes back a long ways in Fort Hays, but he is an absolute delight. And not a lot of people know that he was early on someone who went into the Peace Corps. And he has a lot of stories to tell, and he will tell them. But he also was very involved in the early stages of the civil rights movement in Virginia. So Amber Nickel and she's going to talk to him about his experience as in the Peace Corps. And I'm going to talk to him about his experience with civil rights. And I can guarantee you, all we're going to have to do is say a little bit of a prompt, and then he will be off to the races. That's the kind of thing we want to do. There will also be people, having regular, sorts of Times Talks. I think, as the Provost mentioned, one of the things that we are developing this year is what we're calling a civic engagement passport. It is literally going to be an app that you can use to find different ways to engage in the community, different programs here on campus, yes, but also in the state or the national level, globally. The app will point you toward, for example, scholarships or internships, the whole range of opportunities of engagement, however you define that and seek it. That's the kind of thing that will be on that app. But it is way beyond my technical skills. So one of the things that our student coordinators is going to be helping us do is develop that app. So much of this year will be going into the development of that, and then towards the end of the year or maybe next year, there will be a deployment of it. The other thing we're really excited about is next year is the anniversary. I believe it's the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. The Kansas Council for Humanities will have an exhibit with, I think, 11 or 12 different sort of platforms that talk about some aspect of the Declaration of Independence. It's going to travel around the state. Well, we've just found out that our proposal, which was put together by Ginger Williams, over at the library, the dean over there, that's been accepted. So that's going to come here. I believe it's September 11th for maybe a month or so after that, depending upon if anybody signs up to get it after us. But what we're going to be doing, in addition to that, is ADP is going to be sponsoring what we're calling loosely a kind of challenge to everybody in the university community to find a way, whether it's within your program or as an individual, to find a way to celebrate the Declaration in your own way. We're envisioning something that's kind of like the poster project that's done from Art and Design every year, but it's for anybody. You could build something, you could record and perform something, but whatever it is, it's going to go right in there with that exhibit in our fantastic, beautiful new library. So that's one of the things that we're also looking forward to over the long haul, but we'll be working with people to help develop that this year. So those are the kinds of things we're doing and that we're really excited about, but there will be more. So I want to make some room for other people to answer some questions.
Other questions?
This isn't a question so much as maybe a suggestion for a possible topic. And that is, when people talk about democracy, that's a little vague. And it can be daunting to see, well, are we a democracy? Is this slipping into authoritarianism? All these questions have metrics that are usually applied to other countries. And as someone, I'm hoping, our faculty in political science, maybe even particular, but with the wealth of knowledge here at the Fort Lee State, someone might be able to give a talk about the metrics used for measuring democracy in countries around the world, and maybe then to see how they apply to this country. Because I've come across those things when people are talking about what Viktor Orban even refers to as illiberal democracy. And he's embracing that term in Hungary. And, well, does that match up with the criteria that are typically used for assessing what level of democracy things are? And the EU and other organizations have criteria for it, whether they'll let a country join their club, whether they're truly a democracy or not. It's a question of whether how democratic Ukraine is. That question, without those criteria spelled out, is for most people somewhat vague. So I would just suggest that that's a topic people might have an interest in. If you have someone who that's their area of expertise already, well, we got lucky then, I hope.
Thanks for that suggestion. Other questions? Do you want to?
No, I'm okay. What inspired the theme for this year of the Creative Citizen? What was that like workshopping and brainstorming that as an exec team, and what was really the driving force?
Well, I can tell you that it was, we kicked around some ideas going all the way back to the spring with Dr. Arensdorf and Dr. Macy and the team at ADP. We tried to think of something that, like civic listening, is something you might not expect to be a kind of democratic skill. We wanted it to be something that could be like a thread that can sew the different quilts of the different quilt patches of programs and initiatives and concerns around the university together. But we didn't really settle on this until the beginning of this year in some meetings with the provost, where we really worked through some different words to try to capture what it was we were saying. And we feel like we got to the idea of creativity as a fundamental but undervalued and underappreciated skill that is required in democracy. But most importantly, it was collaboratively developed. We didn't just sort of top down tell everybody, okay, here's what we're going to do, get on board. We actually talked with the people who are responsible not just for developing, but for funding all kinds of different initiatives on this campus at the university level and at the college level.
Yes.
Brittany, I was wondering if you could talk about your new role as the creative advisor. What is that?
So I think in all of this, an important component that came up is that we wanted to have a visual brand that people would recognize. Some of you might have seen down below, we've removed signage that was there previously for American Democracy Project. And so part of a new initiative is to give us a look that is recognizable, that is also inclusive and reflects the values that American Democracy Project is trying to promote. And so In the Communication Studies Department, I'm the person with the background in graphic design, so I was brought on the team and really looking forward to forwarding some of those initiatives.
So, kind of piggybacking on what inclusivity and something about this understanding of democracy, when we, as the way things seem to be moving trajectory-wise, it appears that as people continue to group themselves out, further polarize themselves out, it's almost like democracy is going to be another D word that we don't talk about soon. And it seems like that's leading into the grouping where some people's ideologies are all about advocating for the, the continuance and the promotion of democracy, where other groups feel more strongly that that might be something they don't want to get away from. And that's obviously at a global and national level that's going to trickle down. So at the level of the institution, and we've seen this for years, it feels like the most engagement that we get from students are students with those similar ideals. How are we breaking across these barriers to make it more truly inclusive for other groups too? Because we talked about it last year, I believe, in one of the meetings we talked about. How can we make this for all groups to feel that it's an equal contribution, so we can try to knock down some of these barriers and biases and other pitfalls that are leading to issues at just the human level. Like, I mean, we ask questions, but are we actually making any real measurable progress towards that?
I have some ideas, but at first I'd really love to hear from Amber and Lori, some thoughts that you have, because I know that you are developing programs and ideas and trying to involve a lot of different people addressing some of these things.
This is a hard question to answer. I think the biggest, it's okay, I mean, it's a big question that's facing everybody right now, and nobody has a clear and coherent answer. We're all kind of going to have to develop this creatively and collaboratively. So in terms of what I'm doing in my new position as the internationalization quarter for the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, we need to make that better. I'm settling on CASIC, but we'll get there. I think truly exposure to people unlike yourself is the biggest thing, especially when it comes to internationalization. So this includes not only having a footprint in China and a footprint in Cambodia, but also bringing internationalization efforts to campus and getting as many of our students as possible abroad or in the near abroad. So a lot of what I'm doing this year is focusing on finding resources and funding and support to get our students abroad at a much more affordable rate. And then also finding ways to make sure that we can develop truly interdisciplinary curriculum where our students have access to all of those different ideas. But at a more personal level, in the classroom, I think we all can try to be a little bit more open to things that are unlike us, right? And all of us have our different politics and our different cultural backgrounds and all these kinds of things. But we have to meet on territory that we can all come to. So trying to create that space in the classroom is something I'm still striving to do. I think we're all still striving to do, and I think that's something we can all do on a smaller level right now. But it will take everybody in this room, probably more.
A couple ideas come to mind that there's this really cool article that talks about walking the talk of democracy. And so I think about all of us as being advocates of democracy through our actions and through the values and the principles that we hold. And so one thing I love about ADP is that you guys get kind of can be loud about democracy and have events specifically on that. But maybe sometimes people experience and learn about democracy by the way in which they get to engage with a faculty member or a staff member or something like that. And then the other is just kind of academic integration. Are there things about democratic values or just other areas of civic life that are built into our curriculum all across campus that, again, may not be so outright about democracy, but are developing those skills of kind of collaboration or inclusion or civic action and things like that, that they're learning it in multiple spaces and having their own experiences that may develop some of that in a way that feels more inclusive and not so focused on it, if that makes sense. And I think we need probably both. We need really explicit opportunities, and we need some that are baked into the other things we do. Those are my thoughts.
the dean and the provost, yeah.
And if I can kind of piggyback off of that, I feel like it's important and it's easier to do in a student affairs setting, in a setting like this. You can't take away from the fact that obviously this is a university, a teaching institution, and so much of what we do revolves around teaching. So in the classroom, we border on, oh my gosh, am I going to be perceived as trying to indoctrinate my students by promoting this particular component? And I say that not tongue in cheek, very, very much, you know, having possibly been accused of trying to indoctrinate people, promoting democracy, right, or humanity. And so those are like real concerns. Like I could not care, I could wash my hands of it, but then I couldn't look at the dissonance of that action, right? But on the flip side, who am I riling up? Who am I triggering, right? To then now I'm their next target because I promoted something like that, right? So those are just like things that linger in my mind about those concerns.
Yeah. I think part of what lies before us is, I think on the academic side, we do a good job of creating very focused outcomes for our classes, for our academic programs. But I mean, we have to have that sort of larger ongoing discussion about what is the mission and function of a university. And in particular, a public university, a regionally based university, understanding region in a way that is both local and global, and to have those hard conversations. We talk about triggering, which has become, you know, a source of concern and anxiety, but we also, education is about catalyzing. It's about creating those uncomfortable situations where we say we're doing this in a very intentional manner because we need to be able to think in new ways about new experiences and new contexts. Because if there's one thing we know about this world into which we are launching our students, and in which they already exist, it is that it will continue to be highly unstable, to change and transform, and to present unprecedented challenges and opportunities. So how do we really accentuate that model, that idea that we are the catalysts for sort of breaking through the shells that encase the lives we live right here and enable us to live in a broader, a more democratic, if you will, a more complex and challengingly diverse, because we should use that word, environment and world. And that's not easy, and it's so easy to get siloed in your college and your department and your discipline. How is this the work not just of political science, you know, not just of leadership, not just of psychology, but of all of our disciplines? You know, even those that we don't often think of maybe as transformative. So that's a tall order, and I'm not quite sure how we do it, but I know we need to do it.
I concur with everything that folks have said. I guess what I would add to the conversation is that the classroom is very important, both the physical classroom here, but our online classrooms and our classrooms abroad. And our responsibility as university citizens expands beyond the classroom as well. And so we have to model this, to Lori's point, we have to be the ones that take action and be the catalysts. And so I'm hoping that some of the engagement opportunities that my office is coordinating will allow us to practice some of that dialogue together in a way that enables us to develop our skills as creative citizens, so that maybe we feel more confident to deploy those with students and engagement as well. So that's what I would have to add to what's already been shared.
Thanks for the question.
I think the main way that I would think about addressing it is to point out that two of the things that have come up here are topics that relate not so much to democracy as to things and approaches that are arguably anti-democratic. For many of us, some of the things that we're seeing in the world today, the world is turned upside down. Where foundational values and beliefs that we had are not only being challenged, in some place they're being legislated against. I don't necessarily know that we should feel persecuted or aimed at, especially in higher education. Although, let's face it, you know, there's a lot of people who have deep suspicions about the work that we do and the values from which that flows. So my hope is that however we approach these things, we try to talk about it. We work together collaboratively. We have programs and we don't shy away from it, because if nothing else, democracy begins in conversation. I don't know how else it can happen without us listening to each other and sharing what our concerns are. And I think if we can build opportunities, whether they are explicitly instructional in the classroom or whether they are initiatives that are campus-wide, I think if we can work to build opportunities to have that conversation and build the skills to have that conversation and practice it, then I think we've got a chance to do that. But it's important that we name it, and it's important that we talk about it.
Do we have any other questions? While you're thinking of your question, perhaps when we're finished, we can allow a little bit of time for folks to mingle and have some informal conversations with people in the room, and maybe if there's some ideas for collaboration that you have that you'd like to share with any of the people that spoke today, to give you a little bit of space and time to do that. But before we break, do we have any last questions? Yeah.
Is there anything that ADP is doing specifically to sort of reach out and non-traditional online students, or the attention to make sure that they have access to the other things?
That's a great question. One of the things that we always thought that we had been doing was putting the events online. But recently, you know, we've begun to rethink how we might be able to do it more in real time, so that it could be streamed, or these events could be streamed as a kind of Zoom, where our online students are not just watching it a week or so later if they want to watch it as a kind of program, but there's a way for them to actively engage. That's the kind of thing we're thinking about, but overall, what we are always open to are ideas. And maybe some of them won't necessarily work or work right away, but we always want to hear about them and we always want to try.
Okay, I'm going to give a reminder that if you have not had food or you want some more food, you should stop back there and do that. Any last comments from anyone that they want to share?
Thank you.
Okay, yes, I want to thank you all for coming today, your participation and engagement. We look forward to a really great year with ADP's programming. So please bring your ideas and please help us make it a successful year for the creative citizen. So thank you all very much.
Ellie, you want to announce what's the next event?
Dr. Steinmetz.
Yeah.
Jay, can you tell us, the next event is pretty much literally going to be the kind of talk that my colleague Jay has been doing for a number of years now, and it's starting to become a kind of institution around here. So I know you'll be talking in giving a lecture. I think when he's finished talking about that, you can talk about the Constitution Day events. Do you need the mic?
No, I don't. Yeah, I mean, two really good things that we do, and it's really become a tradition, is reading the Constitution in the courthouse, which Wendy will talk about, and the talks that I've been giving since I came here, I typically try to find some kind of topic or issue that connects to the Constitution. So in the past, it's been free speech in the Constitution, or slavery in the Constitution, or executive power in the Constitution. This year it's really ideologies in the Constitution, so to what degree can we say or argue historically that the Constitution is a progressive document or a conservative document, or a liberal document or a Republican document. And while some of those are not strictly ideologies, more like political theories, nonetheless, they're all kind of connected. So I'm looking at those 4 different belief systems and how they influence the framers and what kind of consequences the framing and erection of the constitutional republic, what kind of influence it has over the development of those ideas over time.
I want to underscore and just let you know that event, this talk, is scheduled for this room in Stouffer. So it's going to be big enough for you to, send your classes, your students, anybody that you think would like to hear about and engage in that kind of thing. We feel like we've gotten a large enough space to bring a lot of people in.
And I believe that is on the 17th, is that correct?
Yeah,
Wednesday the
17th at
17th.
noon. Is that the Wednesday?
Okay. Yeah, and that is Constitution Day itself. The next day, there was a flyer on the table back there that we picked up is the reading of the Constitution. So we will do that on Thursday the 18th at the Ellis County Courthouse. We'll start at 8:30. It only takes about an hour and a half or so to read that Constitution, which surprises a lot of people. It's not a very long document. But we'll have some remarks from Chief Judge Brown to start with, and then we basically have the Constitution out in short parts that people go up to the lectern one by one and read their excerpt of the Constitution. So you read it in less than a minute, so it's not really long. We make it plenty big so you can read it if your eyes are bad like mine. And then we'll have a wrap up with Judge Dries, who usually will give a few remarks as well. So on that flyer, there's a QR code so you can sign up for a particular time, but it is intended to be a come and go. So you're welcome to come when you're available, read, and then leave when you need to. So it will be in the 3rd floor courtroom at the Ellis County Courthouse.
Are there still spots available?
Yeah, there are still spots available, so please feel free to sign up. We'd love to have your participation. Okay, thank you all very much. Grab some food, mingle, and chat with folks. Have a great day.